I first came to the American Museum of Natural History in 2001 when I was working on another project, which allowed me access in a way that was very minimal in some ways. But to get to that space, I had to walk through these long corridors which had all the stored collections. And so as I would walk down these corridors, I wondered what was inside of these cabinets. The museum has 32 million specimens and artifacts in its collection, and 1 to 2% are on display to the public. So I wanted to see the other 98%, I guess. And so I devised a project that I proposed to them where I would photograph the stored collections, and it would be a way of seeing the trajectory almost of history in those collections from the 19th century when the museum first opened to the 21st century style of museum. So the first thing that appealed to me was the long rows of cabinets like in the herpetology collections, because there's such a sense of scale there, and they're all closed, so it's also a kind of latent potential that's existing. And so anything could be in there. And I wanted to kind of shoot that first, photograph that first. And after I'd been in those spaces and shot all different eras of that kind of storage, ones from the 19th century, early 20th, like what the leopard skins are hanging in, where the drawers slide out, through the 50s, the 70s, which would be the herpetology collections, you can tell from the vibrant orange, and then into the compact storage of current terms. So I did that. I shot that kind of storage. And then I really, I guess I became overwhelmed by what the contents might be. And so I started opening up those cabinets as well, and more overtly showing the scale of those collections. So in the butterflies, for instance, the blue triangle butterflies, I would always shoot the multiple, because that was really what a scientific collection was about. And that's a question I get asked a lot, is why do they have to have so many? And that was a question I asked myself in the beginning as well. So I can tell you the scientific answer would be because that's what makes a collection scientifically valuable. You need many in order to compare, because one could be an anomaly, or it could have a missing part, or it could somehow be different. And so having said that, having many of one thing allows them to compare. But what I loved is when you really look closely at those butterflies, each one is different, even unto the one sitting next to it. So there was a real sense of observation going on, and inspection, and beauty and graphicness. So there were wonderful aesthetic qualities to them, implicit scientific value, and I guess that was one of the main things I wanted to include, was the scale, which you see in the cabinets, the idea of the set, which you see in the multiples of the butterflies. And then there's a third element which maybe didn't fit in with my initial idea, but it was the idea of the curiosity. So even though there's no place for that in a scientific collection, some things are just left over from a different era. So the lion head is a perfect example of that. The tag on the lion head said "no data," which is about the saddest thing you can say for a museum specimen, because without any data it has no meaning within that framework. And yet at the same time they can't put it out in the bin. So I saw the lion very early on when I was doing my travels, and he didn't really fit in some ways into the scope of the project. And then at the end, I was thinking about the photos I'd taken and the photos that I felt needed to be included to kind of complete the set. And I remembered the lion head. So I went back, and he was still sitting there. And so I took a portrait of him. And so in some ways, he's a touchstone for me, even though he's the exception rather than the rule of that kind of collection. And so there was an empathic connection with him because he was sort of an anomaly, and I guess I was sort of an anomaly, being this sort of random person skimming through the collections in a way that a scientist wouldn't. They would stay and go down, and I felt that I moved and went across. He is just a reference. I mean, in some ways, he's not the lion. You know, he's stuffed with hay, probably, and so it's just the skin, and the eyes are glass. But he is looking at you, and maybe that's... but he's not looking... I don't think he's looking at us reproachfully. But it's mournfully, possibly. And I know someone told me that with Buddhas, they paint the eyes last, and that gives them their soul. And so I don't know if this makes... And the same with taxidermy, they put in the glass eye last. And it's so interesting that it's artifice, but that's what makes us connect also to that animal. There's a series of yellow-green birds, the yellow honeyeaters. And when I was in the museum, I looked for things from Australia. And when I was in ornithology, there was a research scientist from Australia working there, and I asked him why he was using the museum's collections, and he said that they have more birds from Australia and New Guinea there than they do in Australia or New Guinea. So I thought that was fascinating, and so I chose these birds, which are really small. They're only maybe this big, so it's interesting to see them lined up, so huge and so multiple. And you can see that they've got cotton stuffed in their eyes, and one has a little piece of twine tying its beak together, and all the little details of conservation and preservation are there, and they look peaceful. And I did touch them, and they're very soft, and that was what was amazing to me. I always thought birds were sort of flappy and squawky, and just so beautiful, and it gave me an appreciation now seeing them like that when I go out in nature and see those birds, or the butterflies, which are also found in Queensland. It's really, really a nice parallel.